Hello, friends. Wild Lee of Wild Fempire here for our Moonday Live. Mm. Yeah, and as I was getting ready for this morning, or this afternoon rather, and really checking in, tuning in, what I'm super curious about today is this idea of conscious process. And what do I mean by conscious process, right? Hi, Jess. So good to see you here. Hi, Allie. It's good to see you too. Yeah. So today I am having a very tender day in my personal life. And what is really present for me in this moment is this idea of conscious process. It feels really true that our culture doesn't give us permission or space to actually be humans on this planet, right? Like we're told very clearly from a very young age that we need to get it together, that we need to pull up our bootstraps, that we need to put on our big girl panties, whatever the phrase is you want to use. And I see that arrive in myself sometimes when I'm having a particularly challenging or tender moment. This internal egoic voice that says, you're being too much, you're being too emotional, you're taking up too much space, you're taking up too much time, whatever the negative narrative is that has been pre programmed up in here. When I face challenges like every single one of us where life gets more tender, more raw, where things are not going the way we prefer, or we're moving through deep waves of grief or anger or fear. And so, what's really present for me this morning is this idea of conscious process. Like, what does it look and feel like if instead of shaming ourselves or applying guilt to ourselves when we are moving through these very normal waves of human experience, what does it feel like to instead offer ourselves conscious process? Like, offer ourselves a container to feel the rawness that we're moving through and to be aware of it and to be aware of what we move towards, what we are attracted to, what is soothing for us. Like, for example, I've noticed as I'm moving through this process that I don't really want to wear my crystals or metal jewelry. I'm really drawn to only wearing my wood. This is what sparked this curiosity, actually. And it's like, oh, literally, I am intuitively being drawn to things that make me feel rooted, that allow me a sense of grounding, that don't draw a lot of attention to me, but still make me feel beautiful and present, right? Like I'm conscious of my process. And how often are we moving through these raw waves of experience and things are happening, but we're not actually conscious of it? We're not actually allowing ourselves the truly the joy in the midst of these challenging times. Like there is joy for me in purposefully choosing and wearing my wood. There is joy for me in choosing to wear black and really take up space in that way and physically and consciously own the process that I'm moving through. Mm. There is a texture and a lushness of joy that is present even in these challenging times if we simply choose to frame it that way and look at it through that lens. I would go so far as to say this is allowing ourselves to lead through pussy, to lead through the divine feminine, the divine magnetic. She understands the depth of life that is possible and how we can hold this nuance, that we can hold it all at the same time if we choose to redefine what pleasure means to us and actually begin to weave this concept of exploration and joy into everything that we do. Even when we're sad, even when we're heartbroken, even when we're confused or angry or feeling fearful and lost, we can still create a conscious process around these sensations simply for ourselves so that we are marking this experience in our personal lives. Because if we don't do it, who the fuck will? Right? Like, no one else is going to create sacredness in my life for me. That is my job. It's my responsibility to make my lifetime have meaning and to note it in some way. And another truth that's coming forward is that our culture has really robbed us of ritual and ceremony and the opportunity to have this conscious process in community. And so it's also up to us as individuals and as our circles, as our communities, to begin inviting ritual back into our lives, to step in intuitively and remember that these things are in our bones. Even if, and I speak here as a white person, as a white woman who feels very disconnected from my original roots. And I have learned many ceremonies and perform many ceremonies that I have been able to glean and be offered. But there is a disconnection in me from that original taproot of my ancestors because over the generations we've been encouraged to release those parts of ourselves and to focus more on expansion and capitalism and patriarchy and religion for the sake of control rather than spirituality for the sake of connection to this planet and to all of the other lives on this planet and to ourselves. It's a vastly different way of operating than going to church every Sunday morning just so you could tithe and be in relation to a structure that wants to tell you how to behave, right? Mm. Yeah, so that's what is feeling up in my channel today. That's what I'm wanting to bring forward in this conversation that we're having together because it's not all me, right? We're in this together. We're in this together, this reclamation process of what it means to be human, what it means to be a woman, what it means to be spiritual. What does it mean to own our ride? To undomesticate ourselves and literally come back in to our lives from this innate power that we already have inside of us, that our ancestors knew about, that has been slowly and systemically taken away from us in the name of growth and progress. And what it has left are generations of humans who are spiritually bereft and looking for any sort of connection, any sort of way to feel our roots on the ground and feel ourselves connected to this dream wave around us. And for myself, it feels like the key to unlocking this next layer is this concept of conscious process and allowing ourselves this space to be with these human parts and not just be with them, not just tolerate them, not just allow them because they're already happening, but to actively and consciously be with them and say, I am in grief right now. How am I going to honor this grief? Or, oh, I am angry right now. What container can I offer myself to be in my anger, to be with it, to give it room to breathe, to honor it, and to allow it to be a part of our story instead of hiding it away in the shower or behind the bedroom door or crying into our pillow. Like, how do we allow these parts of our human experience and our story space and mm, and the depth of honoring that they deserve, right? So the truth is we are all in grief most of the time in some form or another. It might be small griefs where we are actively noticing our bodies are changing or not working the way we prefer. They might be larger griefs like being in debt or not getting paid what we think we deserve. They might be huge griefs like the death of a loved one or the leaving of a child from the nest. But they're all grief and we're all in them. And it is true to be human is to be experiencing suffering in some way. Even in the midst of our happiest, most joyful moments, I notice for myself, I might still have a knee that's hurting or a pain in my pocketbook. Like, there is no such thing as perfection, there is process. And if we are able to switch the lens from outcome to process and really allow ourselves to be conscious of the motion that we're moving through, it adds a richness and a depth to our experience, and it makes it worthwhile. It allows us to glean the gold from the experience rather than simply being mired in the suffering itself. It allows us the gifts of our entire experience, not just the parts that we prefer. And so that's what I'm calling conscious process, like really allowing ourselves to be open, allowing myself to say, I'm in this depth right now where all I want to do is wear black and put my wood on, and it makes me feel the vibe of what I'm moving through, and that's okay. That's totally okay. I can give myself this process. Let's see, I have a question here. Do you have any advice for how to allow ourselves more space to experience suffering without isolating ourselves? Yeah. So, correct me if I'm not reading this right, but what I'm wondering is, are you asking for advice on how to really communicate and express your internal experience in community? Is that what you're asking here? And it's tricksy, right? I'm not going to claim to know all the answers because I'm here learning with you. Like, we are all learning and growing and leading one another home back to the ways that our ancestors long ago knew how to do this work in community, because it is so much easier to be together than to hold these particularly large griefs by ourselves. And so, my first bit of advice is give yourself a lot of kindness and compassion as we're all feeling our way through this type of vulnerability together. It's new territory. It's new territory for a lot of us. And so for me, it feels really good to think of the fact that I don't have to do it perfectly, that I'm going to fuck up, that maybe the people I choose to be around will be doing their best, but they might also fuck up. And that's okay. Like I can offer grace and spaciousness for us to make mistakes together and learn how to come back in relationship and to repair and to figure out what went right and what went wrong. But ultimately, it's taking a leap and choosing to invite in intimacy, even if you don't know what the outcome will be, right? It's choosing to be the leader in our circles, in our communities, in our relationships and partnerships. And maybe that starts off with stepping in and saying, "Hey, I just want you to know I don't know what I'm doing in this moment, but I'm heavy. I'm feeling a lot of grief, and I would love to practice vulnerability and stepping into intimacy with you and expressing it and sharing it so that it has room to breathe and room to be witnessed." And I feel really uncomfortable. Fuck, I feel so awkward doing this. I don't know what I'm doing, and I'm just hoping that you might step in and hold space for me. And I know that you might feel uncomfortable too. It feels really uncomfortable watching someone move through hard times. And I just want you to know that I don't expect you to fix me. I don't expect you to have advice or the right answers. I'm really just curious about what it might feel like to be seen so that I don't have to feel isolated while I'm going through this hard time, right? And that was a lot of words. It felt like a lot of words, but really it was about 30 seconds. And you, of course, would say that in your own language, in your own words, in your own way. But learning how to skillfully request these things is an important step, and giving grace to the other people. I know this is a hard part for me personally, is that I'm really skillful at asking for what I need and inviting people into the space. But then if I'm not met with whatever preconceived expectation my brain might have happening in there, I can sometimes take it personally or get my feelings really hurt. So that's where my work lives right now is really holding on to that compassion and allowing other people their process as we're all learning how to be vulnerable together. Because it's a ride, man. It's a fucking trip. Like we are designed we are designed to be these dynamic creatures who are able to connect and express and feel one another. We're I believe we're designed for telepathy. Like we're really designed to connect mind, body, heart, and soul energetically, to read one another's body language and to adjust ourselves in order to be received. I truly feel we all have those gifts innately in our animal bodies. And we've been domesticated out of that and placed into these systems of isolation through our educational system, through the nuclear family system that has been indoctrinated into our cultures, through the ways in which we've all consented to being isolated, right? Like, we're told it's totally normal to be in a house with just you and your partner and maybe your children, and that that's all you need, and it's not true. Like, we really need community. We really need more than just that one or two or three people to share our feelings and our thoughts and our experiences with and to be seen by. We really need our tribes. We need our communities. And we're not taught the skills on how to cultivate that. And this is one of those main skills, learning how to open the heart, learning how to be safe in our own skin, learning how to trust that we can choose people with good discernment to share our hearts with and to mm, hold that intrinsic internal strength to be the leader in these conversations, to be the one that is willing willing to put our ego on the line in order to be seen in our grief and our rage and our fear. It is a travesty that our emotional experiences are shunned and that most of us, particularly those of us in male bodies, have been given an emotional range that is so small that we can barely breathe, much less give language to the depth of experiences that every human is having. It's fucking hard to be a human. It is painful and joyful. It is this full spectrum of experiences. And yet we live in a culture that tells us we should only aim for this teeny tiny little bit here that's called happy and docile. And that if we step outside of this range, there's something wrong with us, or that we're too much, or that we're too loud, or we take up too much space, or we're too needy. And it's all bullshit. Like, that's our birthright. It's our birthright to feel our feelings. It is our birthright to have the gift of the richness of life in that way. It is literally one of the necessary systems of our body in order to be healthy is to have our emotional expression. And when we don't have access to that body system, it starts to get clogged and suppressed. It creates body aches, it creates illness and disease. It creates a suppressed energy that at some point has to be released because we can't hold that much pressure forever. And this is often what happens in abusive situations where you have partners who are just shoving and shoving and shoving until one of you can't shove anymore. And then we step into the primal part of our brains and we react just to release all of that pent up emotion, which is just energy in motion that has not been allowed to move, and it gets projected out and splashed all over people. And then we create dynamics that we regret or that we can't repair. We destroy community and relationships rather than tending to the feelings as they arrive in the moment or as close to the moment as we are able to skillfully release this energy in motion, this emotion, and to do so with one another in community, with grace and kindness, and doing our best to make repair if we fuck it up, because we don't have a lot of training. We haven't been gifted knowledgeable elders who can teach us these skills while we were younger and moving through adolescence, right? This is actually inner teenager work that I'm talking about. And most of us, when we were teenagers, we were not allowed to go through the huge ebbs and flows of puberty where we got to taste all of these sensations and learn how to express them with proper guidance. Like, I don't know about you, but I didn't get that. I got the sit down and shut up, or here's your punishment because you're so emotional, or let me isolate you because I'm so uncomfortable with your lush expression of what's happening inside your body. And that type of shaming, which that's what it is. It's shaming. And when we receive that shaming as a teenager, when we are so vulnerable and we are shape shifting and morphing into an adult in a very short span of time, and we're shamed for the process, it causes most of us to not complete fully the individuation process and to still, even unconsciously, be looking externally for approval and validation. When instead, in a healthy society, in a healthy system, when a teenager comes to that space, they're given space to express, to feel, they're given challenges to overcome so that they can learn to trust themselves. And they come out of it being a sovereign human who knows their place in the family system, who knows their place within the community. And most of us didn't get that. And it's okay. There's grief there. And it's our work now. It's our work to call in this conscious process. It is our work to recognize the places that have been stunted within us that might still be immature, and to begin to offer ourselves that non shaming space of expression now as adults, as the burgeoning sovereign beings that we actually are. Hmm. That feels like the transmission for us today, my friends. Thank you so much for popping in, for taking this in. I would love to continue this conversation. I would love to know what this sparks in you, what you're thinking, how you're feeling. Please feel free to come back to this video and leave comments. I always read everything that people leave, and I love to reply and respond. This isn't about me sitting up here just talking. This is about us growing collectively as a species and evolving together. So, thank you for joining in this conversation with me. Thank you, Jess. I appreciate that so much. I love you all so, so much. Take good care, and I'll tune in with you again next week.